right-size the workforce against that with natural attrition. Now, at 5%, I think that's doable. At an additional 3% is, I think, near impossible. It's hard to be able to think about that. And to me, I consider our workforce to be the most important asset that we at TriMet have. It's not the rail cars, it's not the buses, it's our people. And we have been able to weather in past recessions, this is much worse, but in past recessions, to not have to face that reduction in force. But your point is a very well taken one, and that is, can we have a broader discussion across the whole of the unionized workforce?
Okay, we'll move on. Mr. McFarland.
Sir, Mr. President, members of the board, the general manager did note that there is, of course, the big picture related to the Stimulus Act, or as it's known, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And in general, again, I think it is producing some significant dollars for TriMet. Just a little bit about the differences between the House and the Senate versions that are currently in negotiations. Currently, the House has a total of about $9 billion for transit, the Senate about 8.4. However, in terms of the formulas, they're very, very close. The House includes $1 billion for New Starts funds, which are, of course, awarded competitively around the country, to projects around the country, and don't actually input into the formula, so it's 8 versus 8.4 when you actually look at the formulas. On a general number, that will produce for TriMet about $60 to $62 million. That would be available for the investments that we sort of described. And again, as we've been looking at this, we've been looking at certainly helping our infrastructure in a number of areas. And I can describe a few projects that are in that category. Also projects at the same time that produce jobs, local jobs on the ground, and actually we take very seriously the need to do that and to actually get those jobs here soon. So part of what I'll describe is also our strategy to advance this work as quickly as we possibly can. And then obviously, the other priority for us is to help TriMet's current fiscal situation so that we are in a position to maintain service as best we can. And again, per the general manager's note, the federal government has for some time not allowed direct investment in operating costs, so that is another sort of restraint. It's also important to note that there are other constraints associated with the implementation of this Act, and this also affects the selection of projects and the activities that we can undertake. One of which is that 50% of the dollars need to be obligated, which is generally under contract within, under the House bill, 90 days of its enactment. So there is a sort of federal formula process that goes through that actually allocates the grant funds to the various agencies such as TriMet. And at the same time that that's going on, we'll be in the position, hopefully, of arranging for contracts so that they can be awarded upon the federal government certification that the monies are available for us to go. Might note that that restriction, 50% obligation, is 180 days in the Senate bill. But we're looking at this again with some urgency to get the jobs on the street, so we are working very hard to make sure that we can meet that 90-day as well. But that 90-day clock and the overall speed at which all of these funds need to be obligated, I should say, even though 50% need to be obligated very early, all of them need to be obligated within about a year, and all of them spent within generally 2 to 3 years, depending upon, again, the provisions of the various acts. What that really means is that projects need to be essentially designed and ready to go, and they also need NEPA clearance, National Environmental Policy Act clearance. And so that means some of the very big projects that we might have in mind aren't essentially eligible for this activity, even though from a categorical standpoint they may be eligible. From our ability to deliver them on the timeline the Act calls for, they wouldn't work. An example, anything associated with our light rail projects generally takes on the order 2 to 3 years of environmental work before the project can be ready for grant funds. And so even, frankly, relatively small projects like the park and ride lot take what we call an environmental assessment, which is the shortest I've ever seen that occur. Has been 9 months out of the federal government. So you begin to see the kinds of projects that we'll be looking at will really be focused on maintaining and improving our infrastructure. I do have, John, perhaps you could do me a favor, since a public notice that will be appearing, if not today, soon, which is part of the public grant process. And I might note the board will consider at its February 25th meeting a grant application authorizing the general manager to submit for these grant funds. And as part of that process, obviously, there's opportunity for public comment and review. This notice will be the start of that. And this right now includes really twice that amount of projects that we think we have money for. This is a list of total, if we did everything on this list, about $127 million. So this will become sort of the menu from which we're able to choose projects. Some of these do need to be sieved a little bit tighter related to their readiness and ability to actually be contracted in the time frame that we're talking about. And again, also, we're looking at the jobs impact of each of these individual projects and looking to make sure that we achieve the maximum job benefit that we can with this. These will obviously be subject to public comment and hearing as the notice indicates. The other thing I would note is that we are looking for ways to speed the implementation of these projects. And in that regard, we'll also have for consideration of the board at your February 25th meeting a number of contract review board actions which you've taken in the past, which allow us to do, for example, design build solicitations, where we can combine and shorten the delivery time. So again, we create maximum job benefit in the shortest period of time. And we're considering a number of different combinations of that right now and putting that work together so that it can be considered at your February 25th board meeting. I might also note that in the previous resolutions, you've delegated to the general manager the ability to actually award these contracts. So again, once we can get these contract managers on the street, our hope is to award them very quickly and get the benefit into the local community as quickly as we can. Just to sort of go to the list for a moment, is to pull out some of the examples of things that we are looking at. One, for example, that we've talked about before is additional switch heaters at many key locations throughout the MAC system. There's another series of projects that would, for example, fix some of the, more than you want to know, some of the joints at some of the rail places where we currently have slow orders, where the speed of the train is reduced to sort of avoid the click-click problem. So we'll be fixing some of those issues so that all those slow orders are removed. We're looking at, for example, painting some stations. We're looking at, for example, adding a pocket track and a special turnaround track at Willow Creek that will allow us, at the right point in time that we can afford it, to actually extend the red line further than Beaverton out into Washington County. And that helps not only with, obviously, better service to those additional 5 stations that would be served, but also helps us manage the peak loads on the west side max with the most efficient combination of service possible. A number of powered switches and other devices that sort of help the max system. We're also looking at our own maintenance facilities. An example would be roof replacements and HVAC repairs and improvements. And some other safety enhancements, for example, implementation of the first phase safety study, focusing on some of the key areas on the east side in particular. So we have a very large mix of projects here. We'll be sifting these over the next couple of weeks. And again, we would hope to come to your board meeting in February with authorization to apply for the grant funds. The formal process that goes through is this list of projects need to be reviewed by Metro for conformance with the regional transportation plan. We also review it to make sure that it conforms with the region's air quality plans. That should be pretty safe with the kinds of projects that we're looking at. And then that will be amended into the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Plan, more than you want to know, and the State Transportation Improvement Plan.